Hello, Sal Castro students and Mr. Ramos. This is Andrew at Barnabas Robotics, and I thought I would do a quick overview of OnShape. I might make a few mistakes along the way, bear with me, and then feel free to ask me any questions. Mr. Ramos knows how to contact me, and let's get started. Okay. So when you create your first OnShape document, you should have a tab at the bottom that says Part Studio and Assembly 1. The assembly is where we put all our parts in. Like in our class, we had the heart, and then we had the arrow, and then we inserted them both in the assembly, and we're able to move them around freely together. So we're going to do that real quick. We'll do two parts. So I already have the first tab. I'm going to create another tab. I'm going to create Part Studio. So Part Studio is just where we make our parts. And I see it has Part Studio 1. But I'm going to name them something more appropriate. So let's name this one like a base part. And we'll name the second one by right-clicking Part Studio and then rename, and then we'll do side part. Totally generic names. I can't think of anything silly off the top of my head, but it'll get us going. So I have my parts that I can work with, but to make a part, I need to have some sort of idea what I'm going to work with. So on our screen we have three planes. You can see a front plane and a top plane and a right plane. I'll do that like front. I'm using the square in the top right, and then I have my left or right. See, it's actually the right, but it's on the back side, which is my left. And then there's my bottom. But we'll go here, click bottom, and then we could do top. There's my top. And you can see these planes show up. Now I can hide that top plane by clicking the eyeball. And now you can see my other two planes are still there. And let's kind of look at it at the corner. See, I have my right and my front. So I could also hide my right plane by clicking the eyeball. Now I just have my front plane. And now I have a plane to create a sketch, or at least we need a plane to select to begin with. To start our sketch. So I'm going to leave my front plane for now so I can see that, but a nice thing that you can do is you can hit the P button and it'll make them all reappear or disappear just by hitting P. So I'm going to make them all disappear, and I'm going to unhide my front again so I can see that. Now I have a front plane, and when I hover you see there's an orange highlight. That means I want to select it. I can either select it and do sketch and it knows I want to work with that plane, or you can hit sketch and it will ask you need to select a plane to work with. So I only have one available, which is my front plane. I'm going to select it, and now I'm ready to work. And you can see it creates sketch 1. It's kind of its new plane. It's the same plane, but it has a new name, so it has its own properties. So I could go ahead and hide that front plane and just work with my sketch plane. So I have a sketch plane, and I know I'm in sketch mode. I have sketch 1 here, and then I have all my sketch tools available for me on the top. I have line, rectangle, circle, ellipse. I have arcs of different types. I have inscribed and circumscribed polygons, and I have splines, which are easier to work with. Nodes, you can add an extra node or a point to your lines and shapes. Text, and then I have not actually used this piece here, which is funny that it's called use, and I've never used it, and that's available. This one here turns solid lines into construction lines, so those are more like guidelines, and then some other tools that I might try to go over. But to start, we can either draw our plane with some lines by selecting the line tool, and you notice that my line tool is highlighted and I have a crosshair. If I hit the escape key, I'm no longer the line tool is not highlighted, and I have the arrow, which means select. So I can draw a box, but that just means like select something. So this needs to be highlighted, or if you select another tool, it'll change the highlight. You can see I always have a crosshair when I have a working tool. Or I can click it again, and I'm back to my select tool. So let's make our base part. So I'm just gonna do some lines, and I'm gonna keep drawing. And let's say I wanted to square this one up. I touch that corner, and then come back. You see the dotted line kind of follows with me. And then I'll go perpendicular, and then I can close it by touching on it, and the orange highlights meaning I'm touching, and it'll automatically close, and it fills in the shape. That means the object is closed. Now this would also be really easy to do with the triangle, rectangle tool, and go from corner to corner, and I'd be done. And now that I have those selected, let's say perhaps I wanted to change those numbers. You see when I drew the rectangle, the box is highlighted, but I can't really do much. But if I start typing in numbers, it knows I want to set a dimension. So let's say I want to just say it's 5 inches. I can hit 5, and it'll do it. And the next box is kind of, can you see that there? It's surrounded. It doesn't mean anything. I could be done and move on to something else, but it's going to let me type in another number if I want. So let's say I want to make it like 5 by 2. Now I have a 5 by 2 rectangle, and it has dimension lines, which is really helpful. Okay. Now that I have my rectangle, let's get rid of this one. I can do that by editing sketch 1. And let's say I don't want to call it sketch 1 anymore. I want to name this sketch 1 like my sketch, and I'll hit enter. Now if you hit the check mark, say accidentally, let's say I call it like the Ramos design, and I hit the check mark because it's right there, and I think that's what I could do. Kind of like I'm not doing anything anymore, right? Like I'm not in my sketch. What's going on? I can't draw lines. That's because I'm not in edit mode. So I can come over here and I can right click and say edit, and now my dimensions are back and I can edit. Or I can also usually hover over something, and you see that it highlights. If I right click over it, it's going to say, hey, edit Ramos design. Yeah, let's edit Ramos design. Right? And let's give it another name, because I'm not Mr. Ramos. Right? We'll say Andrew design. I'm not going to hit the check. I'm just going to hit enter, and I can still edit. And I want to get rid of this extra rectangle because I don't really need it right now. And I want to work with this piece. So now I want to extrude. Some of you might have tried doing something like highlighting it all like this. You see all 4 lines are ready to be extruded, and it's still blue here. But I got all 4 lines ready, and I want to extrude. I hit extrude. It says, yeah, sure, let's extrude. It looks like, okay, maybe I'm extruding, but over here you'll see it says edge of Andrew design, edge, edge, edge. And as I hover over each one, you notice that like it kind of yellows or dims the orange on which line I might be pointing to. And if I change my angle, you'll see I've got like a cookie cutter box. It's not solid. Let's confirm it. So you can see it's hollow in the and that might not be what I wanted, right? I wanted a solid piece. See, when I look at it here, it doesn't look like anything. So one thing I can do is I can undo, or I can delete the extrusion here where it says extrude 1. I could right click and I could say delete, or I could just go back because I just did it and use go back. So let's say I want that solid. I can be in the edit sketch, or I can actually be right here and select it. And as long as I select it and the whole thing turns orange and I hit extrude, I will get a solid block, right? There's my solid block. Or let's not do that. I'll hit the red X. So I don't have it extruded. Let's say I'm editing the sketch. Can I still do that? Yes, I can still do that. I want to extrude it, right? But I want to extrude the whole thing. So I want to be inside here. I'm going to click and see how the whole thing's orange? That means we can extrude the whole thing as a solid and not just the edge, and it's all solid. See, it says face. The face of it, I've pulled the whole face out, and I can stretch it. I could flip it the other way. But now I have my extrusion. I don't really want it to be blind. I can flip it. And that should be fine. And then remember, our thickness needs to be 0.125, which is in inches, or you can actually do 1/8 for 1/8 inch, and it'll do the math for you, which is nice. So my nice thin piece. So there's our extrusion, and we're ready to go. But let's say I need a notch, right? Let's put a little notch in here. I'm going to show you a couple really cool quick tools. I can go back to my design, and I'm going to edit this rectangle. I'm going to click front so I get a good view. I'm going to hit F so it fits fine. Okay. And let's say I need a notch right here. One thing I can do is I can draw, like I'm going to cut. I'm going to come here. I'm going to draw this line. And who knows, maybe let's put an angle for fun. And that's all I want for a notch. I don't need a shape. I don't want to cut it out. I'm just going to make this notch, and I want to make it one shape. So I'm going to hit escape, and I could maybe like extrude the other way, and it might be weird, but let's just make this one shape. This cool tool here, the scissors, will trim it. So we'll select trim, and it'll trim any intersecting lines. So you see I'm on the other half of this line. I can click it, it trims it off, and I can trim this one off. But I can also trim the inside one off and see how my solid shape has changed. That's pretty nice. And I'm going to confirm that just to make sure that it's kind of what I want. And there's my notch. So that's kind of what I want, but is it going to fit? Well, I'm not quite sure what my pieces might be. Let's say I want to insert like another 1/8 of an inch, but I also need this angle in here for whatever reason. I'm making a wing or something. We need to edit this sketch, and we need to place it maybe exactly somewhere. And how do we know where to put this? Well, this tool here, or you can hit the D button, it's between these two bars and it looks like an arrow between two lines, is our dimension tool, and we can draw dimensions. So first we could do this way, say it's 2 and 17487. That's, I have a number in mind. I wanted it at only 2 inches. I can hit 2 and hit enter, and it's going to adjust it for me. Well, that's 2, but I also need the opening here to be a certain size. Well, let's say I need this one, not 0.781. Maybe it needs to be exactly 3/4 of an inch, right? And now that it's 3/4 of an inch, I know I've got the right space. And then my piece here, this piece here needs to be my 0.125 for my other piece to slide in right. But I need this angle, right? This is pretty good. I can stretch it around, get it somewhere so I know it's right. I have my dimension in here. Then I have this angle. This angle that looks too big. I think my opening needs to be 0.75, but really I know I need an angle. So if I select this line and this line, it can find my angle for me. It says 146, right? And 146 is not what I want. We're going to try entering 135, because that would be 45 plus our 90. And there, like, suddenly made this deeper. Now I get the right angle. I get 3/4 inch gap that I want. I got 135, so I knew if I drew a straight line here, this would be 45-degree angle. But it goes in pretty far. And then technically, what do we call it? The opposite symmetric angles? I don't know. Mr. Ramos, help me on this. These should be equal, right? 135, yeah. So we know that's 135. And now all these constraints are here. That'll work with us. I still have my 1/4 or 1/8 inch. I have 3/4 opening. I'm 2 inches from there. My part looks good. Maybe I need to know how much this is. I can click the line and get the dimension. 2 1/4, right? Sound right? Or maybe I don't want it from there. You can select the dimension. Make sure your dimension tool's on that select, and I can go from this point to this point, and it'll still do the same thing as selecting the whole line. And now I have my dimensions. And that'll help me make a more precise, proper part. And there's my part. Oh, and just for, if you got time for one more quick tool, I can edit this. And this one's kind of nice. Let's make it nice and square. I can chop the corners. It's this tool here. I can do like a little rounding. And I can select the 2 edges that meet. And then do this thing called a fillet. So I select fillet and then I pick my 2 edges, and it's going to want to know a radius. That's a 1/4 inch radius. Man, let's go 1/2 inch. We'll select point. I'm going to have to double click it, and I'm going to do 0.5 for 1/2 inch. There, I get a nice round radius because I need that rounded part. And that's kind of a cool tool. All right, class, have fun with that. I look forward to seeing some of your designs. Oh, and maybe I'll make it a separate video. We'll add 2 parts together. All right, thank you.